In November 2022, an unknown killer was on the loose in Idaho, and Reddit was determined to track them down. On the morning of Sunday the 13th, police received a frantic 911 call from a student home near the University of Idaho. A girl in the house seemed to be unconscious and not responding. But when officers arrived, they discovered that the student in question wasn't unconscious. She was dead. Her boyfriend was found in the room with her, also dead. And in another bedroom on the 3rd floor, 2 more students dead as well. With 4 students killed, no leads, and rumors of a masked stranger being seen leaving the house earlier that morning, the culprit could have been anyone. But after weeks of no updates or any sign the police were still even looking for the killer, Redditors decided to take matters into their own hands, believing they had the resources, manpower, and dedication to find the person responsible for the deaths of 4 university students. After all, they'd solved cases before. Now, of course, Reddit's hunt for the Boston bombers in 2013 ended in disaster, but surely they had learned from their mistakes and wouldn't make the same ones this time around, right? But nearly a decade had passed since Reddit's disastrous manhunt, and they were no longer the default home for armchair detectives. TikTok's internet sleuths were also convinced that the official investigation was going nowhere and that they would be the ones to help get the job done. But when helping the police turns into a frantic race to see who will correctly identify the culprit first, will anyone win? Or will this become the most destructive internet manhunt in history? It had been less than 24 hours since officers found the bodies, but Moscow police wasted no time. On November 14th, they announced the 4 students who had their lives ripped away from them: Ethan Chapin, Madison Moken, Zaina Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonsalves. The University of Idaho had already confirmed a likely homicide on its Facebook page, but the police didn't want to commit to anything this early. They believed that panicking the local community would only make their investigation more difficult. Therefore, their official statement was restrained. The Moscow police does not believe there is an ongoing community risk based on information gathered during the preliminary investigation. But this wasn't entirely true. In the original 911 call made by one of the 2 surviving roommates, they claimed that they had seen some man who had broken into the house. However, when authorities investigated the scene, they found no signs of a break-in, but all 4 victims had visible stab wounds, many of them defensive. The police decided not to release the 911 call or mention any details from the scene, but they knew the initial statement had to be adjusted. Just 1 day after that initial statement, a police spokesperson admitted that they had no suspects but were looking for an edged weapon such as a knife believed to have been used in the killings. The killer was still out there. On November 16th, Police Chief James Fry called a press conference to clarify the messaging. "We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is still out there. We cannot say that there is no threat to the community and, as we have stated, please stay vigilant, report any suspicious activity, and be aware of your surroundings at all times." They clearly wanted to reassure the public about their safety, but instead, these statements suggested that they didn't know what they were dealing with. A public perception that would end up causing chaos for many involved in the investigation. The next day, the media descended on this quiet college town, seeking out anybody willing to be interviewed. The mayor of Moscow, Art Betke, was one of the first to be asked. With a crime of this magnitude, it's very difficult to work through. The overall assessment is that it's a crime of passion. But this wasn't a statement that the police had approved. It was pure speculation on the part of the mayor. Within hours, he was back in front of the cameras, walking back his comments. "It could be any number of things. The police don't know yet. I haven't been told." The next day, on November 17th, 2022, officials finally announced the deaths as homicides. So at this point, all the public knew was that 4 students had been murdered in their home, and 2 other students had survived. At this time, investigators of course knew a lot more, like, for example, the fact that all of the victims had defensive stab wounds on their bodies, but they specifically avoided mentioning this fact to the public. The careful drip feeding of information and quick correction of the facts suggested the authorities didn't want this case to become a trial by media situation. The Leda County coroner, Catherine Mabbitt, made no such promise and released some of her findings to the media. They were all murdered from a stabbing through a larger knife. The case was already viral around the world, and the lack of information stoked curiosity. True crime enthusiasts were starting to see a narrative forming, a crime of passion, homicide committed with a knife, being investigated by an uncoordinated and clueless police department. Whether that was true was irrelevant. The contradictory press comments cemented their belief that the case would only be solved by ordinary people like them. The case began trending on TikTok, with hashtags Idaho4, Idaho Murders, and Idaho Murder Theory. News organizations sent journalists to the scene, not only to cover the story for their networks, but to produce social media content that would compete with TikTok and true crime creators. The situation quickly became a media feeding frenzy. TV journalists and creators were sharing up-to-the-minute details faster than any traditional media could, showing the world how the town was reacting to the chaos and how the crime scene was changing daily. On Reddit, the case became so popular that users created a dedicated community to keep up with the news, R Moscow Murders. Within weeks of the incident, the subreddit had grown to over 80,000 members, with more joining every day to discuss the latest developments and speculations surrounding the case. Initially, the posts were collaborative, with users working together to make sense of the house's layout and how 2 students managed to survive. But in the subsequent weeks after the murders, the silence from the police began taking its toll on everybody, including the families of the victims. Kaylee's brother said, "They're just so vague with everything that they say, and then they slowly peel it back later until you find the real story. What was the use in telling the community that a sharp-edged weapon was used instead of just coming out and telling us that it was a knife from the beginning? You're not holding the integrity of the case together by not telling anybody anything." But then, on November 21st, the authorities released information about the 911 call. They confirmed that the call came from one of the 2 surviving roommates, but they also revealed that the survivors had called friends to the house for assistance before contacting first responders, allegedly because they initially believed one of the victims was just passed out rather than dead from multiple stab wounds. The new information didn't include any confirmations on the rumors of a masked figure or any details of the crime scene, but they did reveal that the 911 call was made at 11:58 a.m., while the victims were believed to have been killed at some point between 3 and 4 a.m. That left an almost 9-hour gap between the time of the murder and the 911 call. Twitter immediately lit up with rampant speculation. Have the authorities considered the 2 people that were not murdered as suspects? If the murders took place at 4 a.m. and 911 was called at noon, that's a long time to get cleaned up. One of the roommates, Dylan, deleted all of her social media accounts. Seems suspicious. The other one, Bethany, made hers private. Seems appropriate. See what I'm saying? It was hard not to wonder. Most people assume that when presented with a situation like that, they would have called 911 right away, and thus, the 2 survivors, Dylan and Bethany, became prime suspects in the public eye. On November 19, 2022, the New York Times released a report featuring new information not officially released by the police. Olivia, an older sister of one of the victims, had contacted her sister's phone provider and obtained her phone logs, which she wanted to share with the world. The article revealed that in the early morning hours of November 13th, the night of the attack, her sister Kaylee made 7 calls to her longtime boyfriend, Jack. The first call was at 2:26 a.m., followed by 6 more over 26 minutes, ending at 2:52 a.m., shortly before the presumed time of her and other roommates' murders. Jack was a University of Idaho student who had been in a 5-year relationship with Kaylee, which ended 3 weeks before the attacks. They shared a dog, which was apparently in the house at the time of the murder, and according to the survivors, for some reason did not bark or raise an alarm during the incident. In the eyes of social media sleuths, Jack being a recent ex of one of the victims would theoretically give him a motive to commit a crime of passion, and being a past owner of the dog would give an explanation of why it didn't bark or think of the assailant as a stranger. All of this made him a prime suspect for the online community. 100%, Jack should absolutely be a person of interest. He had a motive. Kaylee was living her best life no different than Nicole Brown Simpson, and Jack, like OJ, wasn't going to let her move on. He's your guy. Jack was also becoming a popular suspect on TikTok, with people even doing deep dives into his and Kaylee's personal relationship.
He is Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, and it is speculated that he actually lives very, very close to their house. Now, does he have a motive? In my opinion, yes. Does he have access to the house? In my opinion, yes. So I will be adding him to my list.
But Kaylee's family was adamant. Jack is just as distraught as we are. Jack is our family. Jack is 1,000%, 2,000% our family. And Jack is with us. We stand behind him 100%. Kaylee's mother told the media that Jack and Kaylee had dated for years and were on track to reconcile after some time apart. She believed they would eventually have gotten married and had children, making it unlikely, in her eyes, that he would hurt her. But the internet sleuths found a way to twist this to fit their narrative. When listening to Kaylee's mom, it occurred to me that we sometimes see this behavior when the murderer and victim are close with the family. In the shock of the loss of a loved one, sometimes the perp is pulled in close in a subconscious reflex to not lose anymore, and to keep the essence of the beloved victim close. Online detectives hounded Jack, and in an interview with the New York Post, his aunt suggested that he was struggling to handle the overwhelming hatred coming his way. She spoke about how devastated he was by the news, his sadness about the situation, stating their split was amiable and that they were still friends. But none of that could stop the accusations. Our Moscow Murders was now one of the highest-ranking subreddits, but the increased attention led to more moderation and a focus on facts. In response, additional subreddits like Idaho 4 and Idaho Murders were created to discuss the case and share baseless theories without censorship. My theory? Jack, who was significantly older than Kaylee, was actually narcissistic and controlling. There was apparently a dog in the house that must not have raised the alarm. I think he gives her an ultimatum to get back together, or he'll end himself. Classic control tactic. The fact that her parents were okay with Jack, 20, dating their daughter 16, is a red flag. He must be very charismatic and gain their trust. These theorists were so widespread and confident that Moscow police had to step in, addressing the Jack situation directly.
Everything that we have taken from those calls, we have followed up on, we've cleared, and we believe that there's no connection.
But if law enforcement hoped their exoneration would shut down the increasingly bloodthirsty online mob, they were wrong. TikTok was full of people posting videos of the press conference, expressing their shock and confusion at what they had just seen.
Seems like he was cleared very, very quickly. I'm suspect of that. I really honestly think that Jack should explain himself to the public, or the police come out and explain why they feel Jack is not involved.
One YouTube reporter didn't outright accuse Jack of being abusive, but she did strongly imply it.
Somebody that knew the house intimately, that knew one of the victims. According to the CDC, most relationships don't, quote, start off in an abusive way, but 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men do experience intimate DV during their lifetime. I just want to point out that we don't always know what's going on in people's relationships, and I'm not saying something is going on or isn't going on, but I do think it's the most dangerous time when a partner is trying to leave.
But as with most high-profile cases, Jack and the roommates weren't the only targets in the internet's crosshairs. On November 18th, a clip from a previously recorded Twitch live stream surfaced, showing Madison and Kaylee getting a late-night snack at a food truck hours before the murder. But the internet focused on a man in a white hoodie, who was seen walking behind the women and then hanging around in the background as they talked and checked their phones. When they left, he followed and became the next suspect of the online investigation. Some creators noticed that Kaylee was recorded taking some kind of selfie, raising her camera up a little higher than a typical selfie angle. They wondered, was she trying to take a photo of the hoodie guy standing behind her? Some reports claim that multiple people told the police in interviews that Kaylee had a stalker. This footage only made them more convinced that this rumor was true. Hoodie guy's seemingly strange behavior made him seem like a perfect fit. Investigators have looked extensively into information they received about Kaylee Gonsalves having a stalker. They have pursued hundreds of pieces of information related to this topic and have not been able to verify or identify a stalker. Moscow police never actually named Hoodie Guy, but they didn't have to. Online sleuths doxed him within days of the footage being released. We're not going to share his name here because his connection to the case is undetermined, at best. On the same day, Kaylee's sister, Olivia, gave an interview with Inside Edition, saying she was doing her own investigation. She confirmed that Kaylee and Madison had gotten an Uber home from the food truck, giving the internet another potential lead. The content creators immediately ran with the idea of the Uber driver being the culprit, particularly because he was already familiar with Kaylee, Madison, and Zaina, having driven them multiple times, giving him proximity to the victims. The ever-growing list of people being accused by the internet led police to make another public statement. We do not believe the following individuals are involved in this crime: the 2 surviving roommates, a male seen at the grub truck food vendor downtown, specifically wearing a white hoodie, and a private party who provided rides home to Kaylee and Madison in the early morning hour of November 13th. While the police were trying to shut down online theories, the local community in Moscow was dealing with the reality of an unknown murderer walking free among them. But not only were they worried and scared for their safety, they were still grieving the sudden and violent loss of 4 members of their community. To people in Moscow, Idaho, Madison, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan were not just victims in a crime story, they were friends and loved ones. Friends knew Kaylee as the voice for people who didn't have the voice, someone who always stood up for what mattered and what she believed in. She had graduated early and was preparing for a new start at a marketing company in Austin, Texas. Madison was a marketing major, known for her warmth and deep love of animals. Her friends and family wanted her legacy to be one of kindness, laughter, and love. Zaina was also a marketing major, often described as someone who had a rare gift for lifting others up. She was someone who took any bad situation and turned it into a good one. And Ethan, one of triplets, was majoring in recreation, sport, and tourism management, and was an infectiously positive figure for his friends. People would seek him out to brighten their day. At the end of November, students and families held a vigil in honor of Ethan, Madison, Zaina, and Kaylee. For one emotional but peaceful night, the focus was not on suspects or evidence. It was about honoring these 4 innocent students who had their lives torn away. In Kaylee's father's words, "The only cure to pain is love. That's the only thing that's going to heal us. That's the only thing that's going to heal you." A lesson the internet should have heeded. Meanwhile, ever since the tragedy, the University of Idaho campus had become a ghost town. Half of the students chose to stay home and take classes online. Those who stayed often relied on university-hired security staff to drive them to class because they didn't want to walk across campus alone. The situation also seriously worried teachers like Zachary Turpin, an assistant professor of literature, who posted to Twitter, "Until police release more info or confirm a suspect, I can't in good conscience hold class." While the online manhunt showed no signs of slowing, the action investigation seemed to be at a standstill. Jim Chapin, Ethan's father, told NBC News, "There is a lack of information from the University of Idaho and the local police, which only fuels false rumors and innuendo in the press and social media. The silence further compounds our family's agony after our son's murder. For Ethan and his 3 dear friends slain in Moscow, Idaho, and all our families, I urge officials to speak the truth, share what they know, find the assailant, and protect the greater community." While the official investigation continued to stay silent, social media's investigation was only getting louder. On November 22nd, 2022, a Texas-based self-proclaimed YouTube psychic called Reverend Donna Serafina Lambert performed a detailed reading about the murders, which she said might hold the key to the killer. For 39 minutes, she made a series of highly specific claims.
Coffee house, I don't know what it is, but wherever she was working, he works a couple doors down where they make bread, pastries. I've seen more like French bread, so maybe they make sandwiches there, I don't know. It feels like it's a baguette place, like, I don't know if it's French pastries or, I keep getting these French bread, baguette. I kind of have a feeling it's more like a family business where it is. Like, that his parents might own this business.
TikTok was already full of videos like this, with people offering random, unsourced theories. But this one was different. The bakery details were new and too specific to be ignored by the social media sleuths who believed in the paranormal. And on Reddit, many did. Donna is legit. She accurately described the Tylee Ryan and JJ case to the T, almost a month in advance. She helped Idaho police find the body. Can someone help me figure out the French bakery she was picking up? I'm definitely feeling her lead on this. The online sleuths began researching family-owned bakeries selling French bread in the area, and one fit what they were looking for better than all others. I assumed this bakery. I've heard it's a family business. But this targeted local bakery wasn't a family business. The owner was unmarried and had no children. The store was staffed mainly by young employees, many of whom were already made very uncomfortable with the constant onslaught of journalists hounding locals for sound bites. To help his young staff feel safer, the store owner was keeping the store double-staffed after dark at his own cost. But once the store was named on social media, the place was overwhelmed with hostile calls, many demanding that the owner turn over his non-existent son to the authorities. The store's Facebook page was getting hundreds of thousands of visits and even catering orders for made-up names like Douchey Coward Incorporated. And this store was not the only victim of the social media witch hunt. 2 days after Donna Serafina's video, another spiritual investigator stirred the pot further. Ashley Gillard, a tarot reader who claimed to have previously solved crimes using her paranormal gifts, was asked to provide her insight. In the video she posted to TikTok, Ashley claimed that her psychic skills led her to one word that kept repeating in her mind: history. After Googling Idaho and history, Ashley claimed that she was intuitively led to the University of Idaho's History Department website, where she then spiritually inquired into the photos of each person listed on the faculty webpage. Ashley claimed that she felt a reaction to the murders from every person on the site, except for one history professor. Ashley's alleged gifts told her that the professor was involved in an inappropriate romantic relationship with her student, Kaylee Goncalves, that she had grown obsessed and unable to handle rejection, leading her to hire a hitman to execute all 4 students and cover up the affair. Even though she had no evidence for any of this, other than her feelings, this psychic TikToker started posting a series of increasingly detailed and accusatory videos targeting the professor. At no point did Ashley claim any of this to be speculation. She presented it as facts, repeatedly saying, "The history professor is going to prison for the murder of the 4 Idaho students. I'm not worried about the professor suing me because she will be using her resources to fight for murder cases." But the truth was, the professor never taught Kaylee or any of her 5 roommates. According to her, she had never even met them. Plus, she had an alibi. During the weekend of the murders, she was in Portland, Oregon, with her husband. But Ashley's public campaign against the professor had kickstarted a toxic gossip train that was now at full speed and not so easily stopped by facts and logic. Ashley was benefiting from the professor's misery, getting more and more public attention with every video. The 100-plus TikToks she posted about the professor ended up getting her millions of views and 20,000 new followers, some of whom harassed the professor on Ashley's behalf. Every day, the history professor received online threats, forcing her to take extra precautions in her daily life for her family's safety. Her name was now linked to the word murder in internet searches. The professor's reputation had been so seriously affected by the allegations that she proceeded to file a defamation lawsuit against Ashley Gillard. At this point, the police had completely lost control of the online narrative. It was expected that there would be high public interest in this case, but these hordes of amateur sleuths had repeatedly stooped to new lows, accusing anybody who vaguely fit whatever profile they were looking for that week, ruining lives in the process. So the Moscow police issued their most direct statement yet, hoping it would end the chaos. Investigators have been monitoring online activity related to this ongoing and active case and are aware of the large amount of rumors and misinformation being shared, as well as harassing and threatening behavior toward potentially involved parties. Anyone engaging in threats or harassment, whether in person, online, or otherwise, needs to understand that they could be subjecting themselves to criminal charges. Moscow Police Department cautions the public not to rely on rumors and remains committed to keeping the public informed. We urge reliance on official channels for accurate information. But that was the problem. The official channels weren't releasing anything new. They had cleared people and debunked several theories, like the case's alleged connection to a skinned dog and other stabbings, but revealed no sign to the public or the families of the victims that the investigation was progressing. That was until December 7th, 3 weeks into the investigation, when they finally released a potential lead. Moscow police put a call for information about a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra that had been seen near the crime scene around the time of the murders. They gave no further information. Within 24 hours, the Moscow Police Department was overwhelmed with tips and leads on the car, receiving so many that they had to forward the calls to an FBI center. But to some Redditors, the delayed request for information was another red flag for the investigation. Why did it take so long to begin to look for the white Hyundai? I feel like this information should have been collected very early on, based on tips received in the neighborhood. If it was from footage that was taken from neighbor's camera, I also feel like that doesn't take long to process. I wonder what made them decide to look for it weeks later. Because they are sifting through 6,000 tips and videos along with collecting physical evidence and conducting interviews. I imagine that would take some time now, wouldn't it? Reddit spent the entire week focused on the car, looking for any matching vehicles in the area through photos and footage. They broke down the notable differences between models, the distinctive rear lights, and anything even remotely unique and recognizable. But the car wouldn't hold the community's attention for long. On December 18th, as the investigation's 6th week began, a Facebook group dedicated to the case posted an exclusive new video. Surveillance footage showed Kaylee and Madison walking down a street hours before the murders, talking about someone new.
What did you say to Adam? I told Adam.
The clip went viral, with media outlets and content creators spreading it like wildfire, as everyone tried to identify the mysterious Adam. The internet soon identified him as a bartender from a local sports bar, and in another intentional act of doxing, released his full name and workplace on the internet for everyone to see. To the online sleuths, he was their next top suspect, because he too had ties to the victims. He was the fraternity brother of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack, the man some believed to be the killer, even though he had been cleared by the police. I saw somewhere that Adam is Kaylee's ex Jack's friend. Maybe that's why they were calling Jack so many times. They had a bad situation with this Adam. They also report Adam no longer works at the bar. This doesn't make him a person of interest or anything, but this whole thing could implicate Jack. I'm still skeptical he did this. Maybe he's got me fooled. The bar Adam worked at proceeded to receive a barrage of phone calls from online investigators and media outlets. People who identified themselves as journalists reportedly even began following employees and their friends home, hoping to gather exclusive information on the case. But then, on December 20th, the police confirmed that Adam was not a suspect in the investigation. Despite being wrong once again, the internet was undeterred and quickly pivoted to focus its speculation on a third-year law student who lived across from the victims and had appeared on TV multiple times to talk about the murders. To them, his awkwardness on camera read as suspicious. Have you watched the 3 interviews a male neighbor has done? His smile is unnerving. Why is the student wearing a black bandage on his left hand? I'm not accusing him, but that's just strange. He also doesn't blink when he says, "No, I went to bed." Just strange. And just like Adam, the student neighbor was hounded around the clock, to the point that he felt the need to go on the record to say how much the witch hunt had derailed his life. He created a throwaway Reddit account, posting on the R Moscow Murders subreddit to beg the community to stop harassing him. You all need to stop blaming me for something I had nothing to do with. Feel free to go outside, stretch your legs, breathe some fresh air, touch some grass, and stop trying to pin this on me simply because I did interviews and didn't fit the exact mold of what you think I should have looked or sounded like. Authorities had cleared the most popular suspects with no explanation or new insights into the case, and while many of them continued, and continue to this day, suspecting them, it was becoming more and more likely that the killer was somebody they had never heard of, possibly with no clear motive. On the morning of December 30th, 2022, in a quiet residential neighborhood in Scranton, Pennsylvania, a SWAT team moved in on a house and breached the front door. Moments later, they emerged with a 28-year-old man in handcuffs, a man that nobody in the many Idaho 4 sleuthing communities had ever mentioned or even heard of before the news broke. Yet there he was, being led into a squad car, identified as the prime suspect in the Moscow murders, while the people who chased this case from the beginning responded with a resounding, "Who?" Because while the internet had been chasing its tail, the professionals had quietly found their prime suspect using methods far more sophisticated than crowdsourced gossip and guesswork. The long-term skeptics of internet sleuthing took their chance to make sure everyone knew how much of a failure social media's hunt for the killer had been thus far. Obligatory true crime note after an arrest, Reddit/online sleuthing added absolutely nothing in this case, and instead doxed/harassed innocent people, which is the exact same cycle for every event that the true crime community latches onto. They're not wrong. While online communities have helped solve cases in the past by providing authorities with valuable information, online witch hunts fueled by speculation and theory crafting have never been helpful and only end up causing harm to innocent people. Meanwhile, the authorities had an advantage thanks to evidence that those on the internet never would have been able to access: physical DNA. The unknown perpetrator had been so careless in his crimes that the police found multiple pieces of DNA evidence to tie it all back to him. The first, and most crucial, was a tan leather knife sheath left behind at the crime scene. This Kabar knife sheath contained a single source of male DNA on its button strap, the first critical piece of evidence in the case. The FBI loaded the DNA profile from the knife sheath onto publicly available genealogy sites, building family trees of the genetic relatives to the suspect's DNA. They sent the information to the FBI as a tip, convinced they had identified their prime suspect. But although investigators were confident that the killer and the man whose DNA was on the knife sheath were one and the same, they would need more evidence pointing in this direction before coming to any conclusion. They were cautious and methodical, a drastic contrast to the internet, which had essentially spent over a month pointing fingers in the dark. Law enforcement had collected massive amounts of surveillance footage from businesses and residences around the crime scene. Footage at a gas station showed that a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra had been driving in the area, circling the neighborhood several times in the hour before the killings. Police announced publicly on December 7th that they were seeking the occupants of this vehicle, stating that they were confident the person had information that is critical to the case. The authorities ended up reviewing approximately 22,000 registered white Hyundai Elantras, including one that was registered to a man who was at the center of that DNA family tree. Authorities looked at cell phone tower data, which revealed that the suspect's phone had connected to towers in the area of the crime scene 23 times over the 4 months leading up to the murders, all occurring between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. The suspect lived 8 miles away in Pullman, Washington, and had no clear reason to make that journey so often. But on the night of the murders, around 2:47 a.m., the suspect's phone was in Pullman, then suddenly stopped connecting to the network as surveillance video captured his car leaving his apartment. 2 hours later, at 4:48 a.m., his phone reconnected south of Moscow, showing him heading back toward Pullman. That window lined up perfectly with the known timeline of the murders. By late December 2022, the suspect had already become a person of interest. Even if the authorities were not sharing that information publicly, they still needed something undeniable to justify the arrest, and any hint to the public of how close they were could prompt the suspect to flee. FBI agents from Philadelphia field office established surveillance of his parents' Pennsylvania home, where he had traveled to for winter break. During the several day-long stakeout, they observed the suspect exit the house carrying trash bags while wearing surgical gloves and placing them into a neighbor's garbage can. He also cleaned his car inside and out, methodically scrubbing every inch. As soon as the local sanitation departments collected his trash, it was immediately handed over to the FBI. That trash was flown to the Idaho State Police Forensics Laboratory for analysis, where lab experts found a used Q-tip with DNA identified as belonging to the suspect's father. They ran it against the killer's DNA from the sheath and confirmed that this was the biological father of their killer. They now had concrete biological evidence. This man was almost certainly their killer. On December 30th, 2022, Ethan, Zaina, Madison, and Kaylee's murderer was arrested at his parents' Pennsylvania home. According to the police, when he was arrested, the murderer had only one question: who else did you arrest? Fortunately, the answer was nobody, but they had their perpetrator with no doubt whatsoever. Just to be sure, the authorities took a cheek swab, comparing his DNA with that found on the sheath. The outcome was undeniable. The STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if the defendant is the source than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. This meant that the online manhunt could stop. Right? If only the internet worked that way. While most people accepted that their theories were wrong, some refused to abandon them. As one Reddit user observed, people were completely convinced that random people in the town or in the victims' lives were the culprits. When the perpetrator was arrested, I think that a lot of them did not want to face the fact that maybe they were wrong. But some were on the fence. Amateur internet detectives believed that there were still unresolved questions, and any rumor that sounded even half true was a lead to follow. After the perpetrator's arrest, rumors surfaced online that he had been at Adam's bar on the night he committed the murders. That claim developed into an entire narrative that the perpetrator had been removed from the bar for inappropriate behavior and had even stalked or interacted with the victims there. Take this user on Twitter. So the perpetrator hits on Kaylee and Maddie at the bar. They rejected him. We're more into each other. He follows them home, and violently stabs them. No evidence has been found of this occurring, but regardless, the bar received a second wave of abuse and was flooded with phone calls from online sleuths demanding more information about the incident. The harassment became so overwhelming that they were forced to make a statement on social media. Suspect was not and has not been here. No one was removed from the bar the evening of the incident. Stop calling us. But they weren't only talking about the online sleuths. This is about ABC, NBC News, CBC News, Fox News, CNN too. The below tweet is in direct response to one of the above stopping by to do a story on something we know not to be true. So to protect someone from another round of doxing, we spoke up. The bar's request was met with immediate pushback from users. Whatever. Your issues with people calling you are not a single portion of what the families of these murdered children are dealing with. Sorry for your slight inconvenience, morons. You're a garbage dive bar in a garbage college town. Stay in your lane. Keep your mouth shut and deal with the mild inconvenience. You'll be back to serving $2 Coors Lights in no time. Trash. The bar stopped responding to these reactions, believing that they were only feeding the fire. But seeing the ongoing aggression, some users stepped in to show support. Idahoan here. So sorry for the harassment everyone is experiencing. I've only heard good things about the establishment from people who have actually been there. I am so sorry you and the rest of the staff are having to deal with this harassment on top of grieving with the rest of the community. I can't believe people actually call. Like, the audacity. And just 2 days later, the truth finally came out. On January 5th, 2023, the probable cause affidavit was unsealed, detailing the police's investigation and route to identifying the perpetrator as the masked stranger who entered the house that night. It was the first time the public was informed of everything that happened that night, how one of the survivors had actually seen the masked intruder walk right into the sliding glass door of the house and committing the murders. It explained the DNA evidence, the investigation into the car, the phone data, and every step of their process. For months now, the public, including the victims' families, had been criticizing the Moscow Police Department for their apparent cluelessness. The lack of public information and the slow pace of the investigation had created an information vacuum that led many to believe police were simply not doing their jobs. However, the affidavit proved otherwise, detailing every aspect of the focused and extensive investigation authorities had conducted. But even though the culprit had been caught, he still needed to be found guilty in court. At his arraignment on May 22, 2023, the perpetrator took the stand for the first time. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence stacked against him, the perpetrator did not enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. Instead, his attorney told the judge, "Your Honor, we are standing silent." In the legal world, standing silent is an uncommon but legal strategy where a defendant chooses not to enter a plea. It's an attempt by the defendant to keep options open for potential negotiations later, like pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty. Under Idaho criminal rules, when this happens, the judge is required to enter a not guilty plea on the defendant's behalf. For the next 2 years, the perpetrator and his attorney would maintain their silence. But on July 2, 2025, weeks before the trial was set to begin, everything changed. During a pre-trial hearing, the perpetrator was asked if he had murdered all 4 victims. He said yes, pleading guilty as part of a plea deal. He showed no emotion throughout, even as victims' families struggled to stop crying. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, added, "I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking. It's far beyond anxiety. It's my body reliving everything over and over again. My nervous system never got the message that it is over, and it won't let me forget what he did to them." But the perpetrator's plea deal worked. It spared him from the death penalty in exchange for 4 consecutive life sentences without parole. Kaylee Gonkav's family expressed the strongest opposition on the lack of death sentence, posting on Facebook, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support." They accused prosecutors of making a deal with the devil and criticized the timing, saying they were given insufficient notice to process or object to the agreement. Despite pleading guilty and facing life in prison, the perpetrator never explained why he did any of this. The internet has its own theories, but only he knows why he did it. And it's likely that even if we were told, we could never truly understand the motive behind his unthinkable acts. There are many instances where web sleuthing actually yields positive results. Take a case like the internet's hunt for the man who posted videos online of himself torturing and killing kittens, and later a human. Through his photos and videos, a group of amateur Facebook investigators managed to track him down long before the police identified him. But that investigation was led mainly by two level-headed people, following a focused and logic-based process. Nobody was accused until there was credible, clear evidence to back it up. By the time they went to the police, they had a dossier of evidence to support their claims. The case of the Idaho 4 was an absolute disaster by comparison. A disorganized, emotional mob accusing anybody and everybody with no evidence to back the claims up. From the outset of this case, the police messaging was confusing, and the lack of communication indicating any progress amplified the fear felt by people in the Moscow community and online. Knowing there's a killer on the loose and having a police force that appears to be uncoordinated and lacking a sense of urgency did not inspire any confidence in the community. It was inevitably going to lead to the public's desperate, panicked efforts to take matters into their own hands. But this case highlighted a unique, modern problem: social media. The algorithm rewarded and promoted sensationalized, controversial content on TikTok and other platforms over actual fact-based reporting. It promoted absurd theories and wild accusations, allowing the creators to profit from blatant, reputation-destroying slander. The more negative, fearful emotions the content could stir up, the more interactions it got, and the more those provocative videos got pushed. It's a typical true crime cycle. Most of us don't live in Moscow, Idaho, and only ever saw it through our screens. When a case is dramatized and sensationalized, the tragedy stops feeling real. Through rumors and theories of crimes of passion, spurned exes, or random hoodie guys, the story gets presented as a mystery to be pieced together for fun. We forget that these are people because we're caught up in wanting to solve the puzzle. If this case teaches us anything, it's that whether you're a content creator or consumer, engaging in online speculation about someone committing a crime has real-world consequences. One of the most extreme examples in this case is the TikTok psychic Ashley Giard, who falsely accused the University of Idaho professor of orchestrating the murders. The professor's defamation lawsuit against Ashley reached a resolution in 2025, with the court finding Ashley liable for defamation. No information was released on any settlement or damages paid, but all of Ashley's efforts to countersue have been dismissed, and she has continually threatened to flee the country and head to Bali. Ashley did what so many social media users did with this tragedy. They treated human suffering as an opportunity to theory craft for their own amusement and personal gain, and, in the process, caused even more human suffering. Bethany, one of the surviving roommates who was accused by the mob early on in the investigation, has suffered psychological trauma as a result. At the trial, her statement was read by a friend, but her words gave a valuable look into the experience of someone on the other end of the accusations. I still carry so much regret and guilt for not knowing what happened and not calling right away, even though I understand it wouldn't have changed anything. Not even if the paramedics had been right outside the door. Social media made it so much worse, and strangers made up stories to entertain themselves. The media harassed not just me, but also my family. People showed up at our house. They called my phone, my parents' phones, other family members' phones, and we were chased while I was still trying to survive emotionally and grieve the loss of my friends. You may have noticed that in this video, we did not name or show the killer's face. This is part of our continued effort to report on cases like these as ethically as possible. Our goal is to avoid giving people like Ethan, Zaina, Madison, and Kaylee's killer any more of a spotlight than the media has already given them. If you'd like to know more about why we are doing this, watch our video on the kitten killer case that we discussed earlier. In it, we discuss the importance of the no notoriety movement in detail. Link will be in the description. And if you would like to show your appreciation to the people whose hard work made this video possible, then consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. It's the best thing you can do to help us make more videos, like this one about a case the FBI is asking the internet to solve after failing for 26 years. Click the video on your screen now to hear the full story.